Edward Pentin is up next, but first, some more news to share with you. Controversy erupted this week over a new book-length defense of priestly celibacy. Head of the Vatican's liturgy office, Cardinal Robert Sarah, collaborated with Pope Emeritus Benedict XVI on a book titled From the Depths of Our Hearts. It features their thoughts on the necessity of a celibate priesthood. The book is released at a time when the current pope is considering allowing married priests in the Amazon region, causing questions to arise about the proper role of a retired pope. Joining me now with analysis of the controversy and how it came to be, as well as a look ahead at Pope Francis's plans for 2020, is the Rome correspondent for the National Catholic Register, Ed Pentin, who joins us from Rome. Ed, thanks for being here. At first, it appeared that this new book was co-authored by Benedict and Cardinal Sarah. Now, the Cardinal approached Benedict about writing a text on the priesthood. Benedict sent him a long text last October. Sarah thought it was too long for an article, so they decided to turn it into a book. Why has this book gotten such a ferocious reaction in Rome when these excerpts were released this week?
Well, the key issue here, I think, Raymond, is the timing of it. It's coming just before the publication of Pope Francis's post-synodal apostolic exhortation on the Amazon Synod last year, and the sense is that this book interferes with that in the sense that it's very much upholding the mandatory rule for celibacy of priests, and that the apostolic exhortation is likely to veer away from that. It's going to probably allow for exceptions in the Amazon, to allow permanent deacons to become married, and that would be what critics say would be letting in or weakening the mandatory celibacy rule universally for the universal church. Well, and so there's a sense of a clash here and an interference.
But Ed, I guess my biggest question is this. If Benedict and Sarah are in agreement on the issue of celibacy for priests, as the Vatican insists they are with Pope Francis, what's the issue? The Vatican went through great efforts this week to say, hold on, Pope Francis believes in the celibacy of the priesthood and has reiterated it over and over again. So why is this such a big deal?
Well, the big deal is that it's the exceptions. The Cardinal Sarah and Benedict XVI opposed the idea of having exceptions to this in terms of allowing it to solve the issue of the shortage of priests, whereas Pope Francis is, although he upholds the celibacy rule very strongly, he is open and he has expressed openness to having it studied, which in a sense implicitly means that he's actually open to these exceptions, possibly, if the Synod came to that conclusion, which it did. And so there is a difference of opinion. Yes, they both are very want to keep the rule, but at the same time, they have this difference on whether these exceptions should be made.
Now, the papal secretary, Archbishop Georg Ganswein, who is both the secretary to Benedict XVI as well as the secretary to the papal household of Pope Francis, okay, he issued a clarification about the former pope's participation, going so far as requesting that Benedict's name be taken off the book, okay? What is going on here? And why does there seem to be difficulty in getting the story straight about the publication of this book? What are you hearing?
Well, I think what seems to have been the case is that I think this was perhaps a step too far for Pope Francis, and that he really didn't want this interference. I don't believe he knew this book was coming. It doesn't seem as though he did. And when he heard about it, I think he seems to have got pretty angry and put pressure on, this is what it seems to be and what I've heard from different sources, put pressure on Archbishop Ganswein, who then probably spoke to Pope Benedict and Benedict XVI and said to him, you know, you pledged to be silent. And perhaps you've gone a step too far with this, and they sort of backtracked and walked it back. That seems to have been what happened. And then, of course, with Cardinal Sarah hearing that from Benedict, he would have probably gone along with that as well.
Yeah, well, you know, I heard the same thing, Ed, from a number of sources in Rome, that pressure had been applied onto Benedict, and that the Pope himself, Pope Francis, had been alerted to this book, and it took him by surprise as well. Now, I thought Pope Francis was open to dialogue, though. Why should this be a problem? It's just another voice here in the mix. Is that really such a threat?
Well, it seems to be that what we've heard from Cardinal Claudio Humes, who was the general relator for the Synod. He wrote a letter to bishops this week saying basically a confidential letter to bishops, which we got a copy of, saying that this issue, the document is coming at the end of the month or early February. So in other words, the Apostolic Exhortation seems to have been published already. So this book sort of came at the wrong time for Pope Francis, if, as seems very likely, he's gone along with what the Synod proposed, which was to allow these exceptions in the Amazon region.
There was a lot of reportage that Pope Benedict didn't actually agree to the publication of this book, and that somehow Cardinal Sarah released this without any permission or involvement of Pope Benedict. He pulled a Swiftie here. But Cardinal Sarah released a letter from Benedict where he writes on November 25th, after reading the manuscript, which he submitted to Sarah, Sarah edited and sent back to him, he said that he has his great satisfaction concerning the sections prepared in common. For my part, Benedict writes, the text can be published in the form which you have planned. Now, they claim that Benedict didn't even review the cover here, but that reportage also is wrong, isn't it, Ed?
Yes. Well, I heard from Nicholas Diat, who is Cardinal Sarah's biographer and helped and wrote the foreword to this book, that in fact Cardinal Sarah had been showed to Benedict XVI the cover and the title on December the 3rd, and that Benedict obviously approved it. And so all this talk about Benedict not knowing the exact contents or the exact presentation of this book seems to not be true, because at least from Cardinal Sarah's account, it seems quite clear that he was given plenty of details and plenty of notification, and shown the book, the draft of the book itself, as recently as December. And so to say that he didn't know about it seems very far-fetched, I think, to many people.
We've been seeing a lot of Benedict, Ed, in the media lately. Now, you reported on a recent documentary that featured Benedict XVI, produced by Bavarian State Television, and in it, Archbishop Gonswain offers most of the commentary in the film, which makes no effort to hide the aged former pope's condition. What was the purpose of this documentary, which incidentally aired before this book controversy?
Yes, well, I think it was really just to give an idea of what Benedict's life is like in the Vatican. I don't know if there was any particular motives other than that. But it is interesting that Archbishop Genswein does appear mostly in it. I think Benedict is seen to be very frail. You can hardly hear him speak. In fact, he admits, he used to have what he called a big mouth, but now he can't speak anymore. And so this was quite revealing about that. And whether that was the intention of the documentary, I don't think so. I think it was just really to give a clear impression of what his life is like there.
We're going to get more into this whole book controversy with the papal posse in a moment, but I need to move on to something else. Pope Francis delivered his customary address to the Holy See Diplomatic Corps this week. It was mostly a look back at the past year, but he did mention hotspots in Iran, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and he talked about the Synod and using it as a diplomatic tool. What might have people missed in this address, Ed?
Well, yes. I mean, he talked also about what the key issues which are coming up this year, which is, or key events rather, that he's hosting. He's talking about this global educational pact in May, which is concerning some people because they feel that it's very sort of a secular sort of idea. It doesn't really talk about the uniqueness and truth of Christ. It talks more about common values and fraternity and these issues, which have become sort of the hallmark of this pontificate in many ways. That it's become a lot of talk about that, rather than the uniqueness and truth of Christ explicitly, at any rate. So he talks about that. He talks about also different hotspots, as you say, in the world. But yeah, it's very much emphasizing that, but also. He talks about the UN, he talks about multilateralism, right. He talks about reform in that and trying to bring nations together
and he
in
mentioned
a more
that
effective way, and perhaps reforming the UN.
Yeah, there's also that historic announcement he made, the first woman to be appointed as an undersecretary in the Secretariat of State. Now, this is a fulfillment of one of his promises in recent years, Pope Francis's. Tell us about this Francesca De Giovanni. She is a former attorney who will coordinate the Holy See's relationships with, among other groups, the UN.
Yes, that's right. And she's worked in the Secretariat for 27 years in the Secretariat of State. But this is the first time a woman has been put into a sort of managerial role like this. So it is quite significant. And also, the previous Undersecretary for this position, I believe, was Cardinal Parolin now. So it's a significant position. It has quite a lot of influence. The previous Undersecretary was very much a lead in the China agreement. At least he was there to sign it on behalf of the Holy See.
Wow.
So it does carry a lot of weight, and it is quite a significant decision. Yeah.
Before I let you go, what are you hearing about the Pope's major goals and initiatives for 2020? What do you think he will be focused on? I mean, beyond this outreach, it seems, to other faiths, Islam, building on bridges of humanity, which we heard him talk about at the end of the year and as part of this speech. What else should we be on the lookout for?
Yes, well, he has another big sort of event coming up in March, which is called the Economy of Francesco, where he's going to bring together lots of business people and entrepreneurs, many of them young entrepreneurs, to talk about his vision of economics and how to help bring a sort of a more inclusive economics and more ethical one. That's going to take place in Assisi. One of the big events, I think, this year is going to be when he publishes the new constitution for the Roman Curia, Predicate Evangelium, which is this. It's been in the draft. It's been in the works for a long time, and people are going to be very interested to see what exactly happens with that. It's going to be, I think, if the draft comes through as a final copy, then it will be quite controversial because it places evangelization above doctrine in many ways, and changes the whole sort of model of authority for the Curia, which will be quite significant. So that's going to be a major event as well.
Well.
Then, of course, the Pope will be traveling quite a lot. We don't know exactly where because nothing's been confirmed, but he could go to South Sudan with the Archbishop of Canterbury. He could also go to other places like Indonesia, Malaysia, and possibly Hungary for an international Eucharistic Congress at the end of the year.
And we'll be looking for that McCarrick report, which I know is about to drop any day now, and the reforms of the Vatican Bank, which we've been hearing so much about and heard a lot about in the last year. Edward Pentin, Rome correspondent from the National Catholic Register, thank you as always for being here.